What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Boeckle Brothers channel where we talk all things real estate. I'm Landon.
And I'm Jesse, and on today's episode, we are going over the 3 most commonly used real estate contracts, and we're going to explain them to you. So, you guys, the first and most commonly used real estate contract has to be the purchase agreement.
Super important contract when doing any type of real estate, investing, purchasing, or flipping.
And now you may have heard of a residential purchase agreement or an RPA, or you may have heard of a purchase and sale agreement. There's a couple different names and there's a couple different versions depending on where you are in the country and what state you're in, but they all achieve the same purpose, and that's just to define the purchase of a property.
Some of the main points in a purchase agreement are identifying who the buyer is, right, who the seller is, and what the property is, what the address of the property is, or what the APN number or parcel number of the land is.
Yes, you may find a couple different connotations of the actual property depending where you are in the country. APN is assessor's parcel number, and we use that super commonly here in Nevada.
Right, it truly identifies the land that the property sits on or that you're purchasing. Some other main points of the purchase contract are what conveys with the property, what stays with the property, and what's left out. You know, a lot of fixtures such as appliances, stoves, refrigerators, those typically stay with the property.
They do.
And then furnishings, pictures on the wall, you know, stuff like that, that goes. But
typically doesn't stay.
It has to be identified in the purchase agreement.
Yes. We've actually seen some really weird ones where people have this super ornate chandelier, and although that's attached and that's hanging, that technically is a fixture, which would convey, they need to take it with them.
Right, and it's got to be illustrated in the purchase agreement and defined in the purchase agreement that it either stays or it goes. Super important. We've seen a lot of battles about this at the end of the day.
Yeah. Reason being, when the house closes and you actually buy it, everything in there is now mine.
Right.
So if we didn't clarify this beforehand, sorry, it's mine.
There's a battle to be had,
Yeah.
and you don't want to battle against fixtures of the property. So make sure you define that really clearly.
Yes. Moving on, a next big, important, probably the most important piece of any real estate contract is the price.
This is the biggest one, right? What is the price of the sale? You have to identify the price, and you have to make sure that it's agreeable to both sides, of course.
Absolutely. Moving on past the price is the closing costs, the taxes, any of the other payments, the liens that may be or may not be on the home. What are those? How are those going to be paid? And who's going to pay them?
Yeah, so a lot of neighborhoods here in Las Vegas, talking about our local market, have HOAs.
Yes.
So HOAs have resale packages, which is simply a package that illustrates all the CC&Rs of the HOA, the budgeting, the management, and who's in charge of it. That needs to be delivered to the buyer, but that comes at a cost. Who's to pay for that cost? The buyer of the sale or the seller in the transaction?
Right.
And that needs to be defined clearly in the purchase agreement.
Yeah. And it can change. It can be one way for one purchase, but a totally different way for another purchase.
Right. It's completely negotiable. Most of the transfer fees, tax transfer fees, appraisal fees, lender's title policies, these are all negotiable items within the purchase agreement, but they do have to be defined.
And don't forget that they're all negotiable, because some people might bully you into saying, no, well, you have to pay that. Well, you have to pay those.
Right.
And you don't always have to. A next big piece of any real estate contract is the due diligence. You're going to hear this term a lot if you're getting into real estate or you're currently in real estate investing. But this due diligence period has to be defined in the contract. And what it is, it's a number of days to weeks even that give you ample time to do your inspections, to basically take a good look at the property.
Right. As the buyer, this is your period that is an out period. Right? This is your ability to back out of the contract risk-free, get your earnest money deposit back, and move on. You only have a specific amount of time. So you got to make sure to stay within your due diligence period and make sure that it's enough time for you to complete those inspections, get the inspection back, and make a decision whether you want to move forward or not.
Exactly. And that brings us to the next point, which is the EMD. That's an earnest money deposit. So when you enter into a contract, you're going to have to fork up or deliver this earnest money deposit either to title and escrow or wherever it's appropriate in this situation. But that is basically your gateway to your due diligence period. You need to do that first.
Earnest money is simply showing good faith in the transaction. It can be as low as $1 and it can be as high as $100,000. It's a negotiable item. It's an item that the seller dictates in the contract. They state what kind of earnest money they would like to receive from the buyer, and the buyers to deposit that money as soon as the contract is fully executed.
And that goes hand in hand with the due diligence period, because if you do let your due diligence period expire or you go over it, now you're past the time limit where you can cancel and get that deposit back.
Right. You're putting your earnest money at risk, and that's something that you want to definitely stay on top of.
So ultimately, a big part of the final contract is, when is it closing? When are we going to actually purchase this home? When is it going to transfer from the seller to the buyer?
Yeah, one of the main points of every contract is it must have an expiration date and a close of escrow date. Without that, it is not a legally binding contract. So the date of close of escrow and the expiration date as to when it can be accepted are very important in a purchase agreement.
Absolutely. Now, our second biggest real estate contract goes hand in hand with the purchase contract. And we use this probably daily when we're looking at buying properties. And what it is a real estate purchase addendum. And all an addendum really is just a change. It's just a change to the original contract.
Right. It allows you to amend any point or term within the original purchase agreement. And as long as that's agreed upon and executed by both parties, the change is then made and all other terms of the original purchase agreement remain the same. So one common thing that you and I do all the time when purchasing properties as investors is we change the entity that we purchase under.
True.
We purchase under multiple entities. We have different sources of financing. So if we lock the property up under one financing entity and decide, hey, you know what, this deal may be better off buying it under this entity, we simply do an addendum to the purchase contract, changing the buyer's name from X to Y. And as long as that's agreed upon by both parties, we could purchase it under that other entity.
Exactly. Another super common addendum that we draft almost all the time is changing the price. So when we get a purchase contract accepted, we may have that contract accepted based off of only photos. And so we don't actually know, we haven't been to the property, we don't actually know the condition it's in. But during our due diligence period, when we go and take a look at the property, we may find stuff that wasn't so evident in the listing photos, like roof leaks and all kinds of bad water heaters. Don't take pictures of.
We buy them off initial analysis, right? Initial numbers from our experience. And once we go to the property and look at it, and something major comes up, we have to account for that in the numbers.
If we don't, the project isn't going to make the accurate profit or the right profit for us, and it's going to change. We're going to have to spend more on the rehab, and that means we're going to make less at the end of the day. So what we do is we draft up an addendum to change the purchase price. So let's say we had our purchase contract executed at $100,000, but we found a roof leak.
Right, we need $10K back.
So we're going to change the price to $90,000. And again, as long as the buyer and the seller both agree and execute it, it becomes legally part of the original contract.
Yep. It supersedes the original contract's terms.
Better
So
way to say it.
You could have any amount of addendums. We've had contracts with 6, 7, 8 addendums to the contract, changing the entity name, changing the purchase price. Also, request for repairs is an addendum to the contract as well. The buyer is asking the seller to complete a certain amount of repairs on the property, which therefore is actually an addendum to the contract. So there's many different types of addendums, but simply put, it changes the terms of the original purchase agreement, and as long as it's mutually executed by both parties, it is then enforced.
That's absolutely right. Now, our third contract that we'd like to cover today is a simple assignment contract. And you're going to find assignments a lot of times when you're in the wholesaling space.
Right, we're talking wholesale now, right? So assigning an assignment contract is your ability to assign the purchase agreement that you have mutually executed between yourself and the seller to a new end buyer, a third-party buyer that has that has been brought into the transaction.
Maybe you found them and they're another investor that actually wants the house more than you do. Or maybe you're just a wholesaler that you don't actually buy any homes and you don't flip homes, and you have a bunch of cash buyers that you work with and you sell them homes, or you assign them the homes that you get under contract.
Yeah, so the assignment contract is exactly how it sounds. You're assigning the original purchase agreement and all the terms within to a new end buyer. And when that end buyer purchases that contract or accepts that contract from you, you could tack a fee on it called an assignment fee or a finder's fee.
Exactly. One of the most confusing things, at least for me when we first started doing this, was who's the assignor and the assignee, and how do I know who it is per
It
each
gets a little more
area.
complicated when it comes to
It does.
assigning and wholesaling properties, but after you do a couple, it gets much easier.
One thing that you can always count on is that when you draft an assignment or you enter into an assignment agreement, if you are doing it and you have the property in contract and you are assigning it to another party, you are the assignor always.
Right.
They are the assignee receiving
The
the
receiver
assignment.
of the contract or the assignment is the assignee.
Yeah,
Correct.
Took me a little while to figure that one out.
Yeah. So what the assignee will do is then deposit their earnest money, replace their earnest money with your earnest money. You get your initial earnest money back, and at the close of escrow, you will receive that assignment fee from the assignee. And it could be $5,000, $10,000. We've done assignment fees up to $100,000 plus. It's a really good way to make money without having any risk or any money out of pocket.
So if you guys are interested in hearing more about wholesaling and more about assignments and how they work, check out our other video that we did on how to wholesale your first deal.
So a quick recap on all the contracts we talked about today. The purchase agreement is going to be a contract that's involved in any purchase and sale of a real estate transaction. So that is the most important agreement that you could have.
Absolutely. And you'll also find a lot of addendums that go along with purchase contracts.
Right. That gives you the ability to change the terms within the contract to suit the deal. And then the assignment contract is if you're looking to wholesale that deal, you have to have an assignment contract signed by all parties. Make sure you get your fee in that contract as well, because that's how you get paid. And the most important aspect is everyone signs on the dotted line. There's an expiration date and a close of escrow date, and that makes it a legally binding contract.
That's a very, very important point, that both parties always need to sign all documents to make them legally binding.
Exactly. If you found this video helpful today, we hope it helps you with real estate contracts and making sure that you get to lock up deals appropriately.
If you guys have any questions about anything we covered today, please drop us a comment below, and we'll do our best to respond and give you the answers that you're looking for.
And make sure to subscribe to our channel. And until then, we'll see you on the flip side.